The Nissan RB26DETT engine made General Motors engineers lose sleep for years. Porsche's chief engineer called it impossible when he first saw the specs, and Ford spent millions trying to reverse engineer its secrets. But why did this twin-turbo straight six from a small island nation terrify Detroit's biggest automakers? How did it make 276 horsepower feel like 500? And what made American muscle car owners secretly order them from Japan? These are 20 jaw-dropping facts about why Japan's twin-turbo six still haunts Detroit. Number 20. The gentleman's agreement lie. Here's the dirty little secret that started everything. Nissan claimed the RB26DETT made 276 horsepower because of Japan's gentleman's agreement limiting advertised power. Total lie. When independent dynos finally tested stock engines, they were making 320 to 330 horsepower at the crank. Some early R32 GTRs were putting down 290 wheel horsepower through a heavy all-wheel drive system. That meant the engine was actually making close to 340 at the flywheel. Nissan's engineers later admitted they deliberately underrated the engine to avoid government scrutiny. One engineer confessed they actually detuned engines before official testing, then shipped full-power versions to customers. Imagine buying what you thought was a 276 horsepower car and getting an extra 60 horses for free. Detroit's engineers discovered this deception when they bought GTRs for testing and couldn't understand why their calculations were so wrong. A Corvette engineer famously said, "Either our dynos are broken or Nissan is lying." Spoiler alert, the dynos were fine. Number 19. The Iron Block Foundation. While Detroit was moving to aluminum blocks to save weight, Nissan went the opposite direction with the RB26. They used an iron block so overbuilt it could handle 1,000 horsepower on stock internals. The block was cast with reinforcement ribs in places engineers hadn't seen before, cross-bolted main caps, piston oil squirters standard, a closed deck design that laughed at boost pressure. GM engineers who examined captured engines couldn't believe the metallurgy. The iron alloy had trace elements that improved strength by 30% over conventional cast iron. One Chevy engineer called it a diesel block that thinks it's a race engine. The weight penalty? Just 40 pounds more than an aluminum LS1, but with double the strength. This foundation is why tuners could triple the horsepower without opening the engine. Try that with a 1990s American V8, and you'd have pistons in orbit. Number 18. 6 individual throttle bodies. Detroit engineers thought Nissan was showing off when they saw 6 individual throttle bodies, one for each cylinder. The complexity seemed insane. 6 throttle position sensors, 6 butterfly valves, intricate linkages that had to work in perfect harmony. Why not just use one big throttle body like everyone else? Because Nissan understood something Detroit didn't. Throttle response matters more than peak power. Each cylinder got exactly the air it needed, exactly when it needed it. No plenum volume to fill. No distribution issues. Instant response that made naturally aspirated engines feel laggy. The system was so responsive that professional drivers said it felt telepathic. Keiichi Tsuchiya claimed he could feel the difference in throttle response between individual cylinders. Ford tried to copy the design for a Mustang prototype but gave up when the cost hit $3,000 per engine just for the throttle bodies. Number 17. The ceramic turbo gamble. The RB26's parallel twin turbos use ceramic turbine wheels. Technology Detroit called too fragile for street use. These ceramic wheels were 50% lighter than steel, spooling almost instantly. But here's what scared American engineers. Ceramic shouldn't work in a street engine. It's brittle. Temperature cycles should crack it. Detroit's own testing showed ceramic turbos failing after 10,000 miles. Yet RB26s were running 100,000 miles on original turbos. How? Nissan developed a proprietary ceramic composite with embedded fibers that prevented crack propagation. They also engineered the wastegate system to prevent overboost spikes that could shatter ceramic. The turbos were so advanced that when Garrett tried to reverse engineer them, they couldn't match the material properties. These tiny turbos made peak boost by 3,000 RPM, unheard of for twin-turbo systems in 1989. Detroit's response? Keep using heavy steel turbines and blame turbo lag for poor sales. Number 16, Attesa ETS, the computer wizard. The RB26 wasn't just an engine, it was the heart of a system that revolutionized all-wheel drive. Attesa ETS made Audi's Quattro look like Stone Age technology. The system monitored wheel speeds, steering angle, throttle position, and G-forces 100 times per second. In normal driving, it sent 100% of power to the rear wheels for better fuel economy. Detect slip? The computer could transfer up to 50% to the front wheels in 0.1 seconds. But here's the genius part. It worked with the RB26's instant throttle response to predict when you'd need all-wheel drive before wheel slip occurred. The system was so advanced, it could tell the difference between acceleration slip and cornering slip, adjusting torque split accordingly. Chevy engineers testing stolen GTRs at the Milford Proving Grounds couldn't believe lap times. A 276 horsepower car was outrunning 400 horsepower Corvettes in the wet. One test driver wrote, "It's like the car can see the future." Number 15, the Heika secret weapon. Four-wheel steering sounds like a gimmick until you realize what Nissan achieved with Heikas. The system could turn the rear wheels up to 1 degree in the same direction as the fronts at high speed or opposite at low speed. Doesn't sound like much? That tiny adjustment made the GTR change direction like a car 500 pounds lighter. The RB26's power delivery was calibrated to work with Heikas, reducing power during rapid transitions to prevent instability. It was so seamless, drivers didn't know it was working. BMW bought a GTR just to study Heikas and concluded it would cost $5,000 per car to implement. Detroit's verdict? Too complex for Americans, yet every GTR owner raved about the car's agility. The system was so effective that when Nissan deleted it from later models to save weight, professional drivers complained the cars felt nervous at high speed. Porsche later admitted Heikas influenced their rear-wheel steering development for the 991 GT3. Number 14, Group A domination story. The RB26DETT's true purpose was Group A racing domination, and dominate it did. Between 1990 and 1993, the GTR won 29 races from 29 starts in Japanese Touring Car Championship. Not a single loss. The Australian Touring Car Championship banned it after it won Bathurst by 6 laps. 6 laps. Dick Johnson called it bloody unfair when his V8 Falcon couldn't keep up on straightaways. The RB26's advantage wasn't just power, it was power delivery. The twin turbos and individual throttles meant drivers could modulate power with precision impossible in large displacement V8s. Corner exit speeds were 10 to 15 mph higher than competitors. Jim Richards, who drove GTRs to victory, said the engine felt like it had traction control through pure mechanical sympathy. The domination was so complete that other manufacturers lobbied for rule changes, weight penalties, boost restrictions, even discussions of outright bans. Nothing worked. The RB26 kept winning until Nissan voluntarily withdrew to avoid killing the series. Number 13, the Bathurst controversy. The 1992 Bathurst 1000 ended with GTRs finishing first and second, and Australian fans literally rioted. Beer cans rained onto the podium. Jim Richards famously gave the crowd the finger and called them a pack of arseholes on live TV. Why such hatred? Because the RB26-powered GTRs had just humiliated Australia's beloved V8s on their home track. The winning car was 30 seconds ahead of the first V8. Might as well have been a different race. Ford and Holden spent fortunes developing 5.0-liter V8s specifically for Bathurst. Combined development budget, over $50 million. Nissan's budget, $12 million. Yet the RB26's combination of power, efficiency, and all-wheel drive traction made the V8s look agricultural. The backlash was so severe that organizers changed the rules for 1993, effectively banning the GTR. They literally rewrote the rule book because one engine was too good. GM's Australian division reportedly had crisis meetings about how a 2.6-liter 6 could embarrass their 5.0-liter 8. The answer was simple: better engineering. Number 12. N1 block evolution. The standard RB26 wasn't enough for Nissan. They created the N1 block for endurance racing, a version so overbuilt that tuners still pay $10,000 for used ones. What made it special? First, the block received additional heat treatment that increased strength by 20%. The main bearing supports were reinforced with extra material. Oil drain passages were enlarged to prevent oil starvation during extended high-G corners. But the real magic was in details Detroit would never consider. Every N1 block was sonic tested to ensure uniform cylinder wall thickness. Blocks with any variation over 0.0 mm were rejected. The cylinder head received hand porting to exact specifications. Valve springs were shot peen for durability. Each engine was run for 24 hours at full throttle before installation. If it survived, it was worthy. GM engineers who examined N1 engines called them production line blueprinting, race prep from the factory. These engines could run 24 hours at Nürburgring without rebuilding. Try that with any American performance engine from 1990. Number 11. Oil pump Achilles heel. Even gods have weaknesses, and the RB26's was its oil pump. The stock pump drive collar was prone to failure above 8,000 RPM, potentially destroying the entire engine. Nissan knew about it but calculated that street cars would rarely see those speeds. They were wrong. The first tuners to discover this limitation did so catastrophically. Scattered engines with inspection windows in the block. The fix was simple: a $200 reinforced collar. But the damage to early engines gave Detroit engineers false hope. See, Japanese engines are fragile, they said, until they realized modified RB26s were making 800 horsepower reliably with just that one upgrade. The oil pump issue actually demonstrated the engine's strength. It could make enough power to destroy its own oil system. American engines of the era would have thrown rods or cracked blocks long before oil pump failure became a concern. Once the oil pump was addressed, RB26s became virtually indestructible. Number 10. Ceramic turbo time bomb. Those revolutionary ceramic turbos had a dark side. Push them past 1.2 bar of boost and the ceramic could explode, sending shrapnel through the engine. Tuners called it the ceramic hand grenade. One fragment could destroy all 6 pistons in milliseconds. Australian tuner Mark Berry documented 17 engine failures from ceramic wheel explosions in 1993 alone. The fragments were so sharp they cut through aluminum pistons like butter. Yet Nissan refused to acknowledge the problem publicly. Why? Because admitting it would mean admitting owners were exceeding design parameters, running more boost than intended. The solution came from aftermarket companies who developed steel wheel replacements. But here's the irony. Those steel turbos added lag, making the RB26 feel more like American turbocharged engines. Owners faced a choice: reliability or response. Most chose response and carried spare engines. One Japanese tuner famously said, "Ceramic turbos are like beautiful women, exciting but dangerous." Detroit engineers studying failed engines couldn't believe Nissan took such risks. But that risk-taking is exactly what made the RB26 special. Number 9. 600 HP stock internals. While Detroit engines needed forged pistons and steel rods for big power, the RB26 laughed at 600 horsepower on stock internals. How? Over-engineering that would make German designers jealous. The factory pistons were forged aluminum with reinforced ringlands. Connecting rods were forged steel, shot-peened and magna-fluxed. The crankshaft was forged from a single billet, not cast like American cranks. Each component was designed for double its stock power output. Nissan engineers later admitted they designed the RB26 to handle Group A racing power levels, around 600 AP, then detuned it for street use. This headroom meant tuners could double the power with just bolt-ons. No machine work, no bottom-end rebuilding, just turbos, fuel, and tuning. Meanwhile, American V8s were ventilating blocks at 500 horsepower. One famous comparison, a tuning magazine built a 600 HP RB26 and a 600 HP small block Chevy. The Nissan used all stock internals except turbos. The Chevy needed $8,000 in forged parts. After 50,000 miles of abuse, they tore down both engines. The RB26 showed normal wear. The Chevy needed a complete rebuild. Number 8, gray market gold mine. Before the 25-year import rule, desperate Americans paid smugglers up to $150,000 to illegally import GTRs. The desire for RB26 power created an underground network of importers, fake paperwork, and hidden cars. One California dealer had 30 GTRs hidden in a warehouse, selling them with forged Florida titles. Customers included tech millionaires, drug dealers, and even a few professional athletes. The cars were registered as 240SX with engine swaps. The scheme worked until an FBI raid in 1999. Agents crushed 18 GTRs while owners watched. One owner tried to pull the RB26 before crushing but was arrested. The tragedy sparked the modern JDM import movement. Enthusiasts lobbied for legal ways to own these cars. The RB26 had created such desire that people risked federal prosecution just to own one. When R32 GTRs finally became legal in 2014, prices exploded. $15,000 cars became $50,000 overnight. Every single buyer wanted one thing, that impossible engine Detroit couldn't build. Number 7, the 25-year revolution. August 2014 changed everything. The first R32 GTRs became legal to import under the 25-year rule, and America went insane. Dealers pre-sold hundreds of cars sight unseen. Prices in Japan tripled overnight. Container ships full of GTRs headed for American ports. But buyers weren't just getting cars. They were getting engines Detroit still couldn't match. 25-year-old RB26 were making more reliable power than brand new American performance engines. The flood of RB26s into America created a tuning revolution. Shops that had never seen an inline six were suddenly building 1,000 horsepower monsters. American tuners discovered what Japan knew all along. These engines were underrated from the factory. Dyno videos went viral showing stock-looking RB26s embarrassing modern Hellcats. The 25-year rule exposed an uncomfortable truth. Japan had better engine technology in 1989 than America had in 2014. Detroit's response? The Hellcat, a 707 horsepower supercharged V8. Impressive until you realized tuned RB26s were making more power from less than half the displacement. Number 6, RB26 swaps everything. The RB26 swap epidemic proved one thing. American enthusiasts preferred Japanese engineering. By 2016, RB26s were being swapped into everything. Classic Mustangs, Camaros, even pickup trucks. The engine that was supposed to stay in GTRs was powering half of Formula Drift. Why? Because dollar for dollar, nothing matched RB26 power potential. A junkyard RB26 for $3,000 could make 500 horsepower reliably. A comparable American V8 build cost twice as much and weighed 200 pounds more. The swap community discovered something else. RB26s fit anywhere. The inline configuration and compact dimensions meant it could squeeze into engine bays designed for 4 cylinders. One famous build put an RB26 in a Mazda Miata. 600 horsepower in a 2,200-pound car. The builder said he chose the RB26 over an LS V8 because it's just better. That sentiment spread through American car culture. Young enthusiasts grew up wanting RB26s, not big blocks. Car shows featured more GTRs than Corvettes. The engine had won hearts and minds Detroit thought they owned forever. Number 5. Detroit's forced induction wake-up. The RB26 forced Detroit to finally take turbocharging seriously. For decades, American manufacturers treated turbos as emissions band-aids or novelties. The RB26 showed turbos could be reliable performance solutions. GM's response was the LNF Ecotech, a direct-injected turbo 4 that acknowledged everything Nissan got right. Ford developed the EcoBoost, essentially admitting V8s weren't the only answer. Chrysler? Well, Chrysler kept building HEMIS, but the damage was done. A generation of enthusiasts had learned that displacement wasn't everything. The RB26 proved that a well-engineered small engine could outperform a lazy large one. Detroit's turbo engines were decent, but they lacked the RB26's character. No individual throttle bodies, no ceramic turbine wheels, no sense of occasion. They were appliances built to meet cafe standards, not inspire passion. The RB26's influence was everywhere, but its spirit was missing. American manufacturers had learned the how, but not the why. They built turbocharged engines because they had to, not because they wanted to. Meanwhile, every RB26 felt like its designers cared about every detail, every response, every sensation. Number 4. Why V8s felt threatened. The RB26 challenged everything American performance stood for. Detroit's philosophy was simple: there's no replacement for displacement. Want more power? Add more cubes. The RB26 said, hold my sake. With 2.6 liters, it embarrassed 5.7-liter V8s. With forced induction, it made naturally aspirated engines look primitive. With technology, it made brute force seem stupid. The threat wasn't just performance, it was perception. Young buyers saw V8s as outdated, wasteful dinosaurs. Why burn twice the fuel for less performance? Why carry extra weight? Why settle for lazy engineering? The RB26 represented efficiency, technology, and intelligence. V8s represented tradition, stubbornness, and excess. Detroit knew perception mattered more than reality. They could argue about torqued curves and power bands all day. But when a 2.6-liter 6 embarrassed a 6.2-liter 8 at a stoplight, the argument was over. The RB26 had won the bench racing war. Every kid with a laptop could see dyno charts showing RB26s making 4-digit power. V8s needed exotic builds to match what RB26s did with bolt-ons. The mathematics were undeniable, and mathematics didn't care about tradition. Number 3, the VR38DETT connection. Nissan's answer to their own RB26 was the VR38DETT and the R35 GTR. Bigger displacement, better technology, more power. But something was missing. The VR38 was clinical, perfect, boring. It lacked the RB26's raw character. No individual throttle bodies meant softer response. Integrated exhaust manifolds meant less turbo options. Closed deck design meant lower boost limits. The VR38 was faster but felt slower. Tuners noticed immediately. Where RB26 loved boost, VR38s needed careful calibration. Where RB26s sounded angry, VR38 sounded refined. The new engine was technically superior but emotionally inferior. It proved that numbers don't tell the whole story. The RB26 community rejected the VR38 as too computerized. They preferred the older engine's mechanical feel. This rejection taught manufacturers a crucial lesson. Character matters more than capability. The VR38 could run 9-second quarters from the factory. The RB26 needed work to get there. But enthusiasts chose the engine that needed work because the journey mattered more than the destination. Building an RB26 was a relationship. Running a VR38 was an arrangement. Number 2. Gran Turismo generation. The RB26's greatest victory wasn't on racetracks, it was on PlayStations. Gran Turismo introduced millions to the GTR and its impossible engine. Kids who couldn't afford go-karts were building 1,000 horsepower RB26s virtually. The game's detailed tuning options taught real principles. Boost control, gear ratios, suspension geometry, all accurate enough to transfer to real cars. This created a generation of enthusiasts who understood forced induction before they could drive. They knew why individual throttle bodies mattered. They understood anti-lag systems. They could explain twin-turbo sequencing. When these kids grew up and bought real cars, they wanted RB26s. Not because magazines told them to, but because they'd already built hundreds virtually. They knew the engine's potential intimately. Detroit had nothing to compete with this cultural penetration. No American engine had the same mystique, the same digital legacy. V8s were for old guys. RB26s were for the future. This perception shift was worth more than any racing victory. Nissan had won the hearts of future buyers without spending $1 on marketing. Gran Turismo was better than any advertisement because it let people experience the engine's potential themselves. And before our final revelation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more automotive deep dives and comment below if you knew any of these RB26 secrets. Number 1. What Detroit learned too late. The RB26's lasting legacy isn't horsepower or technology. It's the lesson Detroit finally absorbed decades later. Engineering excellence beats displacement. Character beats capability. Passion beats production numbers. The engine taught American manufacturers that buyers would pay more for less displacement if the engineering was superior. It proved that racing success translated to showroom sales. It demonstrated that young buyers valued technology over tradition. But the biggest lesson was about commitment. Nissan built the RB26 to win races, then sold it to the public. Detroit built engines for the public, then tried to race them. The difference in approach created a difference in result. Today's American performance engines show RB26 influence everywhere. Direct injection, twin turbos, variable valve timing, all technologies Nissan pioneered in production. The Corvette finally went mid-engine. The GT500 makes power through supercharging. Even Ram trucks offer turbo 6s. The RB26 didn't just haunt Detroit, it educated it. The engine forced American manufacturers to abandon lazy engineering and embrace efficiency. It killed the no replacement for displacement mythology. It proved that a well-engineered small engine could define an era. 25 years later, the RB26 remains the standard by which performance engines are measured. Modern engines make more power, but few make it with such character. The individual throttle body's angry response, the ceramic turbo's instant boost, the iron block's invincibility. These weren't just specifications. They were personality traits that created an emotional connection no spreadsheet could quantify. Detroit learned to build better engines because of the RB26, but they never learned to build engines people love the way enthusiasts love that twin-turbo straight six from Japan. That's why it still haunts them. Not because they can't match its performance, they surpassed that years ago, but because they can't match its soul. The RB26DETT proved that engineering excellence and emotional connection aren't mutually exclusive. It showed that race-bred technology could be reliable. It demonstrated that small displacement engines could change the world. Most importantly, it proved that when engineers are allowed to build their dreams instead of their spreadsheets, they create legends that outlive their specifications. That's the ghost Detroit still chases. Not the horsepower or the technology, but the passion that created them.